Pilla talks taxes. He has been for over 45 years, and there isn't a human on the planet with more experience solving problems on behalf of taxpayers. He wants to solve your problem whether you know you have one or not. So if you do have a tax problem, get a hold of him, visit his website or call his office. If you don't have a tax problem, your current tax problem is taxes themselves. So let's get into the policy issues of today, the big one being the government is shut down again. But what does that even really mean? Who is affected by the government shutdown, and what do we really need to know about the government shutdown?
What we need to know about the government shutdown, Josh, is this is the fifth now shutdown that's occurred since, I believe, 2020 or 2021. The last one that occurred was in 2018, the longest one in history. That was 35 days from the end of December to the end of January following year. These things are starting to get more and more common. The reason is the friction that's going on between the Democrats in Congress and the Republicans in Congress, and they just simply can't get their heads together on what needs to happen with a federal budget. In this particular fight, we're arguing about $1.5 trillion that the Democrats want to add back to federal spending to fund Medicare payments to local hospitals. What's happening with a lot of that money, Josh, is it's being used by local hospitals to pay for the emergency care expenses for illegal aliens, right? People that are in the United States illegally. The Democrats insist that no money is being used directly by the federal government to pay for health care for illegal aliens. And it's true, except that the money is going to local hospitals, which in turn use that money to pay for emergency services for illegal aliens. To say that it's not a direct payment, that's accurate, but most definitely it's money being used to fund the health care of illegal aliens. There's a legitimate debate as to whether, United States taxpayers should be paying those fees for these folks that are not in the country legally. But that's the core of the debate here right now. The Democrats have dug in on that, and we'll see how long this thing goes.
You just talked about how the government shutdowns are more and more common, and the longest one was 35 days, which is like 10% of the year. Do we get a 10% discount on our taxes because of that? Who do these government shutdowns actually affect other than federal employees?
That's a good question, and it directly affects federal employees. The IRS, for example, has its what they call their lapsed appropriations contingency plan, which I have in front of me here. It's a lapsed appropriations contingency plan. It's about a 170-page document. I didn't obviously print out all 170 pages of it, but that's their plan to deal with this, which tells you that these agencies are thinking ahead about what's going to happen when the government does shut down. But the answer to your question is who's affected is the direct effect is felt by government employees that are furloughed. And so we've got the Internal Revenue Service, for example, that's sending roughly half of its workforce home. And the people that are working at the IRS, some of them have non-budgetary contingent payment plans. That is to say that the IRS has got funds available to pay some of these people. Some of the agencies have funds available to pay some people. But to the extent that there is a one-year budgetary cycle that funds payroll for the federal government, the workers that are subject to that aren't getting paid. So you got a great number of Defense Department employees, including sailors and airmen, soldiers and Marines that are not getting paid. You got a number of air traffic controllers that are asked to show up to work that aren't getting paid. And of course, we're having some sick outs now with air traffic control because they're not getting paid. They're not going to show up. And of course, the people that receive public funding to supplement their incomes, those folks might not be getting paid either because of the programs that would not have been appropriated. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to Social Security recipients whose funding is not necessarily subject to annual congressional appropriations. Those payments are fixed and ongoing, and so Social Security recipients generally continue to get paid. So basically speaking, the people that are impacted are people that are on the dole from the federal government and the federal government employees.
I guess the only one that I really care about is our servicemen that are not getting paid for their contributions. But other than that, I'd say keep it down for as long as you can.
It's funny when these things do shut down, you start to realize what are the essential functions of government and what are they not. Whenever they say we're going to send home non-essential employees, you ask yourself, why are non-essential employees working for the government in the first place? Shouldn't all government employees be essential employees? And if we don't need them, why are we asking American citizens and businesses to pay taxes to support non-essential employees? If we have federal employees simply for the purposes of creating employment opportunities, then that is exactly the wrong some reason, those folks should be in the private sector and making their services available to private sector companies. To the extent that will cut the tax burden of private sector companies, so much the better, because now they are able to grow those workers that become essential for private sector companies. We really got to take a hard look, and this is one of the things that DOGE was trying to do here back in February and March, is take a hard look at what the government spending programs are and see how we can trim that fat. We got a federal budget right now, Josh, that's in excess of $6.5 trillion. And we saw the leftist Democrats in March, April, May of this year screaming at the top of their lungs about the idea of cutting even the most absurd examples of spending. We don't have to go through all that again, but and now they want more of it. But if you can't honestly and sincerely come to grips with the idea that there is some waste, fraud, and duplication in the federal government that should and must be cut, then you're just on some other planet. It's that simple.
So let me see if I can suss this out. Democrats are holding hostage the paychecks of bureaucrats, which are usually Democrat leaning, to get more bureaucracy. And by doing that, they're shutting down all of the bureaucracy.
That's certainly one way to put it. And does it make sense? It certainly does not make sense. There's no question about it. And here's the thing that's ironic is these same Democrats that are now standing firm on this issue, at least as of today, voted about 13 or 14 times for this very same continuing resolution during the Biden administration. We had a number of circumstances where funding ran out and they continued to operate the government, in some cases month to month, in some cases week to week. This particular continuing resolution would have continued the funding through the end of November, roughly 8 weeks or so by the time the fight really started. Those Democrats voted for that very same continuing resolution while they were a majority during the Biden administration. Now they won't vote for it. And it's word for word the same deal they previously approved. It boils down to this $1.5 trillion of Medicaid spending they want to add back into the budget to fund local hospital emergency services, which is used to treat illegal aliens. The Republicans have taken the position that if they're in this country illegally, they should not be entitled to taxpayer-funded benefits. Now, if you disagree with that, fine, but that's what the fight is all about.
What's going on specifically in the IRS? You mentioned the IRS is getting furloughed.
Yeah, the IRS is furloughing a number of its employees right now. The current number of IRS employees is roughly 74,000 workers, right? That's just north of 74,000. That's down roughly 25,000 workers from when Trump took office at the end of January of 2025. So they've already seen a 25% cut in their workforce due to the DOGE stuff and due to the early retirements. Attrition. We talked about attrition in the IRS over the last year and a half here on this podcast, and I mentioned over and over again that the IRS's workforce was subject to significant numbers of people that were eligible to retire in 2024, 2025, and 2026. And so we're seeing those retirements go on right now. And that's got nothing to do with budget cuts. It's got to do with the fact that these people are eligible for retirement and they're going to take their federal pensions and sit on some beach someplace. And I can't say that I blame them. And so that's going on at a high level at this particular point in time. The bottom line is they've lost 25,000 workers to retirements and layoffs. And now they've got roughly 74,000 workers, and just about 39,000 of those, plus or minus, are going to go home. All right. So that's going to leave roughly half workforce available in the IRS to continue essential operations of the Internal Revenue Service. That's what they're going to be focusing on right now.
You say the word essential. How does this outage affect the October extension deadline? Do I still have to pay my taxes?
Well, just because the government's shut down doesn't mean you shouldn't pay your taxes. The fact of the matter is they're not going to be shut down forever. Who knows how long it's going to continue, but it's not going to go on forever. And if you file your tax return late, there's a failure to file penalty, which is 5% a month. For every part of a month the return is late, capped at 5 months, or 25%. And then there's a failure to pay penalty that's 1% a month. So you don't want to do that. But the IRS is going to continue what they call essential activities, essential services for the Internal Revenue Service. And that's going to include a mail processing, tax return processing, payments processing. You'll be able to e-file your tax return. If you paper file your tax return by mailing it to the IRS, there will be people at the Internal Revenue Service to open that mail and process those checks. I have always maintained in recent years that you should always make your payments online to the IRS. I always discourage people from mailing a check to the IRS because it's so common for the IRS to misapply those payments. But if you use the direct pay system on their website, and I used it on behalf of a client today, so I know it is working, then you can make payments to the IRS online and not risk those failure to pay penalties. If you're using a professional tax preparer, they're going to submit that tax return online anyway. The other thing that the IRS is going to continue working on now is the completion and testing of the IRS's computer systems for the upcoming filing season. You know, when the calendar rolls over on January 1st, December 31st, it rolls over to 2026, the IRS has got to get in tax return filing mode. Come April 15th of 2026, people are going to have to be filing their tax returns for 2025. This big, beautiful bill act that you and I have been talking about for several episodes made substantial changes to the Internal Revenue Code. All those changes have to be coded into the computers so that the computers can process tax returns correctly, and the tax returns themselves have to be rewritten and redesigned to accommodate a number of these changes. And they're going to maintain staff that will do exactly that. The IRS is going to continue its computer operations to prevent loss of data. They're also going to be working in their collection functions to make sure that no statutes of limitations, collection statutes and assessment statutes of limitations are subject to a calendar, and those calendars don't change just because government operations are shut down. So they're going to continue employees on staff to make sure that they take action to keep those statutes from running out. Criminal law enforcement actions and undercover operations are going to continue during the shutdown. They're not going to send those folks home at all. What I don't see on the list here, and what I'm a little concerned about, is the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate. The Office of the Taxpayer Advocate operates as a liaison between the IRS and the taxpayer, and they step in to help citizens sort out problems created by IRS inaction, the IRS's failure to take steps that it's supposed to take, or actions the IRS is carrying out that are causing hardship. One of the things that we see with government shutdowns, and I'm dealing with this with a client right now as well, is the IRS issues wage levies and bank levies, third-party levies, 2 or 3 or 4 days before the government shuts down. And so now you've got these levies in place, and how do you get them released? The revenue officers are gone. They're not working anymore. And so if the taxpayer operations are not funded and not taken care of, then those operations are shut down as well. And so now you've got a situation where somebody's suffering with a wage levy or a bank levy that they can't get released. Now, interestingly enough, I want you to implore your senators and congressmen to support the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act. One of the provisions of the act is to separately fund the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate, so they are funded during government shutdowns, so that they are there to help people get wage levies and bank levies released. This is something that we as citizens can take action on here now.
It is the iconic situation of the government shut down, but still give them your money. But if you have a problem, that sucks to suck. It's how it goes every single time.
Yeah, it's really quite nefarious, Josh. We've seen in past shutdowns, the IRS's collection function issue a flurry of wage levies and bank levies. And this is one of the things that we go through with my Taxpayers Defense Institute, which is my association of attorneys and accountants and enrolled agents. This is one of the things that we deal with all the time during these shutdown issues. We'll see dozens of our members that will complain they got this wage levy or bank levy, and now they can't get a hold of anybody to get it released. I haven't seen that flurry this time around, but in times past, it's been very egregious and deliberate, in my opinion.
There's no chance they don't do that on purpose. They're going to send out as many of those as they can, because most people don't question the IRS. They don't assume the IRS gets things wrong. So they're just going to freak out, and then the IRS isn't around to answer the questions or help you out.
And it's really even worse than that, because not only do people assume that the IRS is correct and must be proceeding legally, but even if there's an inkling in a person's mind that the IRS is not the right thing, they don't know how to challenge them. This is why my work over the last 40, 45 years has been so important, giving people the tools they need to push back against the IRS to get relief.
So all of this nonsense with the IRS and the government shutdown, does the IRS even have a new commissioner yet?
They don't even have a new commissioner yet. It's interesting that you raise that question, because what has happened here in the last week, the president has created a new position at the IRS. They created a new position that they call the IRS's Chief Operating Officer, and appointed a person to the office CEO. And that person happens to be the commissioner of the Social Security Administration. So we've got the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, continuing to act as acting commissioner of the IRS. And now we've got the commissioner of the Social Security Administration that's functioning as the CEO of the IRS. And his job job description is to run the day-to-day operations of the IRS, which is the job description of the commissioner, by the way, which is a presidential appointment position, meaning it's a senatorial consent position. In other words, the position has to be filled by the president, yes, but with the advice and consent of the Senate. So the Senate has to vote to confirm the IRS commissioners. Now, of course, the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee and Democrats in the Senate generally are complaining that the president bypassed the senatorial appointment process by naming a quote-unquote CEO. But the White House assures us, John, that there is going to be a nomination for the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service at some point. I think they should have had one by now.
Doing this as a bureaucratic workaround because they were being stonewalled in their nominations?
I guess I don't know why the president is doing it with this particular one, because the Republicans have a majority in the Senate. I think the Senate Finance Committee breakdown is 13 Republicans and 12 Democrats. So the Republicans hold the majority there. They hold the majority in the overall Senate. For example, the president's nomination for the position of IRS chief counsel, the number one attorney in the IRS, was just confirmed by the Senate Finance Committee by a vote of 13 to 12. The Senate Democrats are voting down the line to oppose every single one of the president's nominees without exception on party lines for no good reason other than the fact that Trump nominated that person. So when the Republicans hold the majority, the president is going to get his nominee. The question is, why hasn't the president nominated a person for the office of IRS commissioner? They had Billy Long. You and I talked about Billy Long a couple of times here, but now he's got his walking papers. He was removed as commissioner. We still don't know why. We know he was nominated to a position of ambassador somewhere. I don't know that he's been confirmed, but he is out as commissioner of IRS. So the IRS has gone through 7 commissioners, Josh, since President Trump took office in January, 21st or whatever it was, of 2025. 7 commissioners, 2 actual commissioners and 5 acting commissioners they have gone through, and we still don't have a full-time commissioner as we sit right now.
I guess at least we're not paying another commissioner salary. I don't know what else to say about that.
So we got that going for us. That's something.
So I want to circle back around. Does this mean every time they shut down the government, we can get a percentage off of our taxes, like when your Wi-Fi gets cut for a day and a half?
We don't get that luxury, Josh. There's no line on the tax that allows you to do a subtraction for the period of time the government is shut down. You owe what you owe, and they're going to collect, and it's got nothing to do with whether they're shut down or not. You still got to pay the money. The question is whether these government employees are going to get back pay. I saw something today that says it's questionable. Historically, they've always gotten their back pay. I can't believe for a minute they're not going to get their back pay, but we'll see what happens with that.
If they don't get their back pay, is that going to be a historic mass exodus from government positions?
That's a good question. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. I remember 6-7 years ago when the government was shut down for 35 days, the president of the National Treasury Employees Union, right? This is not a government person. This is a person that works for the union on behalf of Treasury employees. They got their own union. That person was crying and whining about the IRS people that were out of work and not getting their pay, and how are they supposed to pay their bills. I had no sympathy for the fact that those folks were out of work. I remember writing a number of articles criticizing this union president when the president is silent on all of the additional IRS workers that are hired specifically to enforce collection against individual citizens by issuing wage levies and bank levies that deprive them of the income they need to pay their necessary living. So when the shoe was on the other foot, the whining and crying was epic. But as far as the rights of citizens are concerned to make sure they've got income and assets available to pay their living expenses, no one gave a rip about that. I was the only one that spoke out about that.
They learned the golden rule as do unto others
before they do unto you.
That'll be all for this week. Thanks for watching, taxpayers. And remember, there is no such thing as a hopeless tax case. And if you think yours is the exception, get a hold of Dan here. He can help you see the daylight. Dan, tell them where else they can follow along with your taxpayers' rights.
Follow me at Pilla Talks Taxes. I'm primarily on TikTok, Facebook, True Social, and right here on YouTube. Make sure you can share these videos, subscribe to my channel, and share these videos with your U.S. senators and your representative. And if you've got a tax problem, go to the website, TaxHelpOnline.com. Buy any book off my website at any price point. You get a free 15-minute consultation directly and personally with me. So go to that website, TaxHelpOnline.com.